So, hi, uh, my name is Arul, and I represent People First Consultants, a 27-year consulting firm doing very deep work with customers in many different areas like talent hiring, culture work, coaching, L&D. Apart from that, we also want to reach out to as many individuals as we can to lead a life that is inwardly satisfying and happy, and at the same time externally excelling and successful. So we've been, in this space for long, and we also do a lot of contributory support work through multiple areas. So why we here today is to take a very sensitive topic. I would say it's an extraordinarily sensitive topic. And I'm just if you even look at the way we position this topic, develop a white mind as a change catalyst. Uh, I'm going to share from the heart. I mean, it's not a step one, step through three kind of a sharing. And if anybody is listening to this live, you can come in and have a chat. Some of you I know are hearing it later on. It's a honest chat on this whole difficulty of change. And from what we see right now, in the last couple of years, there was a hell of a lot of a change that happened, for us across the globe. But that kind of a change was almost no option. Nobody asked you a question whether you would like to stay at home or work from home, or it was decided, it was announced, and if you're not complying, then there are consequences. So that, and we all managed very well. So it's true, for example, if you have a cyclone, you have a cyclone, and the cyclone is not asking you, hey, are you ready? Have you managed your food supplies, and maybe have you finished your work? Can I hit you right now? It's really not like that. It just comes announced or unannounced, and then it just occupies your life for a couple of days, and people manage extraordinarily well. Maybe there's a little bit of a shock, but then most of the time they bounce in extraordinarily well. And and both during cyclone and these challenging times, you see the amount of goodwill that pours. People just pitching in, supporting, people suddenly discovering talents that are there in the background. But these scenarios are different. These scenarios are where it's forced upon, no choice, and then you adapt extraordinarily well from historic data in the recent past. But I'm really talking about change in an organization, or change in institution, or change in a social enterprise. Now, these are not as simple as sudden forced upon change, because we still have options. Maybe the founder comes and says that, hey, let's do this, or let's say there is a leader with legacy who's been in the organization for long, and let's say a new leader comes in from a different industry, and so there's all kinds of stuff that happens, but there's a lot of options. You can accept, you can you can struggle, you can decide to change, you can resist. All those permutations and combinations exist. So that's where any change becomes difficult, and it's that journey that I'm going to share right now. And I'm actually just taking one simple point in this whole thing. While we could discuss about change in multiple different ways, I'm really talking about it's more like a mirror to ourselves. Are we ready? Are we prepared to be a change agent? Now, interestingly, for me, in my 27 years, I started the company right out of college. Right in the first year itself, I got a lot of opportunities to play a change role. My first two assignments itself were like that. One company was heading towards a lockdown. The factory manager called me. He knew I was young, but he had seen me in a workshop. He called me. I was in the factory for 7 days, understanding the worker union challenges, talking to the top management, guiding them. Interestingly, I was playing that role right from the beginning itself, and I've been playing that at multiple times. Even if I take that very first encounter that I did, I want to really talk about that to you right now. And So just to set the context a little bit more before I go to the example, we're just talking about one quality to build a white mind. Okay, a poise of neutrality, a white mind. But more, I'm actually focusing. So, white mind is a part of neutrality. Neutrality could be a much deeper poise. And I'm just focusing on just one single aspect and sharing different examples and seeing and trying to, hopefully inspire you or convince you as to how it's really important to develop a white mind. Okay. So, going back to this example, so I went to the factory and I was this over enthusiastic and young guy out of college, and in about a year or two, I've got this assignment. So I obviously pulled up my the best of my engineering talent and a keen eye. And morning to evening, I was in the shop floor making observations, doing calculations of their output, trying to figure out what's going wrong, right, etc. And the workers were, in a way, convinced about perhaps my sincerity, perhaps that I think my assignment was for a week. On the fifth day or the sixth day, one of them called me aside and said, "Would you care to come for a walk with me?" I said, "Yeah, sure." For me, anything is data because by then I'd done a lot of calculations, but I've not cracked the problem. Which means that the management said that there was a lot of resistance and the output was not good and stuff like that, and they were prepared to make certain changes to shift the motivation of the workforce and bring the organization back to its best. So I walked around with this person, and he took me to a godown, where you stock the finished products. It was a manufacturing company making very tiny, products, and I really want to keep the name of the company confidential, and thus I'm not getting into the details. So I went there, and he showed me a lot of finished products which were not shipped out. And he said, "Look, here, look here, look here, look here." I said, "Why is so much of stock here?" Because even at that time, just in time was quite popular. And he said, "Look, we can produce even 2 or 3 times more, but there is a problem here. I see these," and he said, "X, Y, Z is a problem. Management is like this, management is like that. You see, we may do best, but actually, you see, there's no use because even what we finish has not gone out." Now, my mind, which was for those 4 or 5 days curious, observing, keen, even if they were taking a tea break, I was watching, what's going on, became colored. It became tinted now at this point of time. And I was quite young and I didn't have the maturity to understand that while they said what they said was the truth, there was absolutely no doubt about it. It was the stark truth. But as a management consultant, as a person who was trying to facilitate a change, my vision or my seeing got slightly influenced by their way of thinking. All right. So I came back, continued another day, and the seventh day, the MD called, and he said, "Okay, so Arul, what did you observe?" I shared, some of the things, and I made certain suggestions and all that stuff. So what I said was pretty accurate. Okay, even at that young, I had the capacity to put things together. So I put it all correctly. I also predicted that this is exactly what is going to occur in 6 months or 1 year if you don't intervene. Everything was perfect, except in my articulation and my emotion and the tonality, I had taken the side of them, which the MD was super. He picked it up. He picked it up, and to be honest, he used a word like, "Oh, so they've made you another union leader." So I said, "Look, maybe I am coming from a charge, but these are the observations. These are what I have observed, etc." To cut a long story short, though I had presented correctly, I did not gain the what. So I would say the MD didn't maybe. He was slightly disappointed. Is the right word I would say, and he had asked me to make a written report, which I did, and he said share it confidentially with me, which I did. But I do know that they did not act on it. Maybe because I lost the capacity of the white mind. I'll explain to you what this is. A white mind is something which is observing and it is acting on the mission. In this case, find the problem and bring a solution. It's white, it's clean, it's neutral. In this case, I was tainted. So I did not have that white mind. In fact, I lost it. And that's even though my observation was correct, my report was good, my predictions were right because after about I predicted it in a year, but in 6 months it exactly happened what I had pointed out. And I did connect and say that, look, I already told you that this is exactly what's going to occur. I did connect, in that sense of it. But that's the first time that I realized, and it's not the only mistake I made. I've made successes and there are failures, and I really want to talk to you about those of you who are even forget about change agents. Even if you're a people manager, uh, or forget even about that. Let's say you're a parent. Okay, this whole necessity of a white mind is something that I'm going to talk about. So that's where I began by saying that, look, my whole intelligence, my whole understanding didn't really contribute in that sense of it. And so then I started developing this capacity. And I think I took a while. It's not that day one I decided and, things change, because this is extraordinarily subtle. That is where I began my journey. That slowly I wanted to be part of things. I wanted to keenly observe, but yet I do not want to get entangled. I do not want to become, I do not want the both parties to go for me kind of a thing, and put their, intentions inside, so that my mind is not clear. So that is the journey that began. So I'll flip from there to now, and then maybe some in between stories we can catch up, and what practices I've done we can catch up. Anybody who wants to come in and have a chat, feel free. Uh, so if you come to right now, I would actually make a happy statement that by and large, there is a, I would say maybe a 70, 75, 80%, there is this capacity of a white mind. And there are those, 10, 20, which are very deep and unconscious, which I'm still working on. In fact, the whole industry has become very gung-ho about the fact that we should have no bias. And it's not that the organizations don't know what they're asking for. In fact, I do know 3 years back, there was a bank, international bank, which were looking at vendors who could run, 3-day interventions on no bias, stuff like that. So they do know that this takes time. So right now, I'm able to be in situations where, let's just talk about, let's say, the workplace. Let's say there are multiple views coming in. uh, I'm able to listen. It's not that I'm blocking anything. I'm able to listen. I'm able to differentiate the reality of what is present there to opinions and reactions that come. See, oftentimes what happens is, like in a team of 10, 20 people, there are a few people, let's say, even who are performing well. Their voice does have a certain weightage. But at the same time, they could be living in all kinds of different inner responses, to a change that is occurring. They may not like it. They may like more comfort zones. Or some people may be adventurous by nature. So there are different nuances. So I've slowly started understanding that, and I'll tell you the exact major breakthrough that occurred recently. The minor breakthroughs, we will weave the lines, we'll link the lines in some time. The major breakthrough that occurred to me was actually as recent as within the last 4 months or 5 months or so. Suddenly, one day, I figured out inside me that I'd reached a point inside me that, in a very positive way, I kind of made it was not a declaration, but it was an arrival at a state where I said, look, I think I've spent now, like, a good 27 years of my life, both professionally, as a consultant, running my own organization, as a family member, and all that, where I have taken a whole lot of the inner emotions of others, the agendas of people, and all that into me, which is not a white mind. uh, I can serve people, but a white mind is important. But in this case, though I have the clarity of the vision of what to do, I get, I used to get influenced by people's emotions, or even, for example, if there's a right action and if we need to do it, sometimes I slow it down, people, because, I say, okay, maybe we give them a little bit more time and all that. So I used to get entangled a little bit or engulfed a little bit into other people's emotions and responses and reactions and all that. So suddenly I had this inner statement saying that I no longer want to do this, and I'm free from both my inner emotions and ups and downs and others. So when this came, I knew that it was a realization positive, and I knew intuitively that it was the right thing. So I kind of accepted this state of arrival inside me, articulated to a couple of people, and even as I articulated, I could see that they fully didn't understand, and one misunderstood. That maybe I'm not going to listen, or am I cold, or whatever. But actually, the other side has occurred. Post these 4 months, I am far more listening in that sense of it, far more observing, far more inclusive, but yet I'm largely more and more free from picking the emotions, energies of others, or even myself. And but this is like an inner state, which certainly is helping to have a very wide mind, a mind that observes, a mind that sees, a mind that listens, but it doesn't take those problems inside. It doesn't take the entanglements inside. Rather, the seeing is looking at the reality, but beneath it, the inner vision of what needs to be done, or the intuitive knowing of what needs to be done, is definitely building up more and more and more. Okay, which means that hopefully, the kind of contribution that one can make from this white mind is enormous to one's own organizations, to one customers, and even in consulting assignments. So to put the dots in between, and maybe I'll even talk about. I've also been involved in institutional work, uh, trying to work with certain schools and colleges where they were doing some progressive, holistic learning and teaching, but there was not sufficient buy-in from the parents, for example, or from the teachers, or from the students. So I've kind of intervened in many of these places, and always I've seen this. Those things that worked out well. My awareness and training facilitation have always been reasonably okay. But those times when it really fell in was when I was largely neutral. I was actually that catalyst where I could enter, point out, share with them certain inner practices or slight organizational change, certain policies and stuff like that, and just walk out when needed. The biggest breakthrough I had was during the lockdown, where an organization approached, two founders, and they had to make some changes in intervention. They thought it will take a lot of time, so we signed up for several coaching sessions. But in 3, it was done. I could move in, I could sense, I could point out, I could then walk out and say that I think you're fine. I think you can carry on your own, and when needed, you can reach back in that sense of it. So to connect the yeah, I mean, one more example, to not only share the successes but also the difficulties. So I've worked with institutions, and always, I've seen this, that when this capacity of white mind walk in, point out, leave them responsible for it, but at the same time inspire whatever's needed and walk out, it's been successful. Times, whether it was in leadership retreats, or whether it was in these initiatives, or in any kind of a social project as such, times when I picked the agenda of, let's say, normally, when you do a change or something, there are always this 2 parties, 3 parties, different kinds of opinions, some conflicts, resistances, and all that stuff. Times when I picked one agenda of one side, most of the time I have not succeeded fully. Times when I took both sides agendas inside, I think my brain got fried up quite a bit, in that sense of it. So more and more, now let's, in the last 10 minutes that we have, we could go into the practices that I've had. So more and more, I would request the change agents or leaders or managers to really consider it as important that, you're not really going to get this capacity to do change only by, playing your role or building certain competencies. They're not sufficient. It's an inner voice that is also needed. It's almost like a prerequisite to be a useful, a beneficial change agent. And that's like a white man. And there is no one method to it. The reason I'm sharing is to build awareness in you, and the significance of this topic that we have pointed out. And then how do you reach it? How do you reach it? Okay. So maybe two very significant practices is one. I think many who know me are familiar that I spent a couple of years on a single practice, which is, being with my breath, being with my breath. I don't do it that religiously right now because I've moved into other practices. For one period of time, for a couple of years, that was my single practice, largely my single practice. What it gave me a capacity, like if a ship is on the sea and there's a huge storm, if the ship has an anchor, no matter what happens, it'll be there, it'll come back in there, it'll toss, but then it'll come back into that equilibrium. It may toss, it'll come back into that equilibrium. That's what natural breath gave me. And I guess each of us can figure out our own method. So which means that I'm talking to somebody, let's say in a consulting assignment or even in my own office, I'm trying to do something and they're responding and there's a reaction in me. The moment there is a reaction in you, the white mind will go away. There's a reaction where I'm feeling like, hey, why is it not occurring? Why is it they're not listening after I've told some 20 different times? And the thought structure starts moving. There's noise in the mind. There are ripples in the mind. Now you start seeing them like that. You start seeing them like that. And I mean, you could make certain inferences. When you start seeing them like that, it kind of gets reinforced, it kind of gets recreated, and you are entangled. You may have the best genuine intents, both for yourself and the other on the organization, but somewhat it runs into difficulties. Okay. So the first practice that I've shared the practice. So you instead of getting entangled or running the scenarios in your mind, you just come back to the breath for a few seconds, come back to the breath for a few seconds, come back to the breath for a few seconds. It really helped. Why before I come to the second practice, I want to take a particular retreat that I co-facilitated with somebody, but I was the key facilitator, and it was a residential retreat. I think for 2 or 3 days. I think 3 days, and they were going through. They were very competent individuals in the room, and they were going through a difficult phase, and I was facilitating something very difficult. Very interestingly, as the retreat started, I knew it's going to be difficult, and I moved into a practice. Okay. I moved into practice where I was connected into the ground. We were in a very beautiful nature spot. We connected to the ground, connected to the sky, connected to the leaves. We're always most of the time out. Even when we're sitting in a room, it was open. So I was connected, and that retreat was morning 9 to evening 9. Like about 12 hours with a lot of breaks. So all the 3 days I was anchored, and very interestingly, even though the retreat was very difficult, I actually came out very energized. That I had done what best I could. So I think to develop a white mind, to kind of flip back, inner practice is a must. It's like, so for example, if I want to play football, then I need to practice football. If I want to develop a white mind, then I need to do a practice that's going to give me a white mind. A practice that goes going to give a white mind, not by theory, but by an inner experience. So watching the natural breath is like, you're grounded by the flow. You're not stopping anywhere. You're able to be with the flow. You're able to move with the moment. And that's really life. Change is not a set of, step one, step two, step three, I'm going to do. And then when this occurs, I'm going to kick in the next one. That's going to occur only in a system which is, mechanical and automated, like a machine. Human beings are extraordinarily complex. You may predict 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all different things could occur, very differently. And I think we are experts in managing complex situations like that. So the next practice, what I did was, connecting to nature, ground into. We were sitting on the chair, sitting on the ground, sometimes lying down also, as it was getting quite long. But always I was in a practice. So even though I could feel like a reaction or even a judgment forming, what are these guys doing, or even my own incapacities, do I really have the capacity to hold it on for another thing? When those thoughts or things come, ground, then the mind is alert, and it's white. So that's another thing that I did in a retreat, which worked out very, very well. The other thing about it's a difficult practice actually, and we all have to figure out our own methods. The other practice that has enormously helped me was to avoid. I mean, we may read this in theory, but how do we do it? Avoid judgments and opinions, staying inside. This does not mean that I don't evaluate a situation or a person or give up feedback. That's all part of the process. But a judgment or a reaction or a dialogue that goes inside, I think I have worked for years, maybe 4 to 6 years I've taken to work on it really solid to avoid that, play of chain of thoughts inside. And there's no one single practice for it. I know another person, who's also a senior learning and development facilitator. He used to have a practice that, when he saw his mind getting very active, his practice was he'll sit and he'll start observing the thought, and he'll go to the root of the thoughts, and then he said he was getting a certain quietness. I guess people figure out their own methods, but ultimately it's some practice, that's really going to help out on this. Okay. Um, yeah, to kind of sum up, I think it's time, MBA institutions, leadership programs, Coursera, online courses, consultants and facilitators, that when we make certain interventions, we are training people, to make changes and all that stuff. It's the age of data. We're looking for data in everything, and data is good. But when we come to change, it's really about the human reactions and the responses and the emotions. So we need to have very different qualities. Sometimes we need to have the capacity of ruthless compassion, that do the right thing. Sometimes we need to be very compassionate and at the same time, do what is needed with the inner conviction and truth and authenticity. But for all that, I personally feel, and the sharing that I've made today is, let's all maybe consider uh, how great our work life would be if a few of our managers, if a few of our mentors, if a few of our coaches take the time to develop themselves so that they're offering a white mind, a mind that sees, a mind that observes very keenly, but a mind which is also having a heart, which is white, which means it observes, but it is not loading itself with the problem, but actually speaking behind the white. It can sense the potential solution. It can sense the potential vision. In sometimes even the people or the organization may have forgotten, but the white mind, through the consultant or the manager, is able to sense something very deep, behind what's occurring. And instead of loading the mind with a problem, it allows connection with that vision, with that purpose, or with that potentiality, and operates in a pure play manner, which is going to facilitate. Then, actually, what happens is with less effort or with less noise, we will be able to actually facilitate a lot of changes in joyful and tough ways as needed. So, this is my sharing today, and if there's anything anybody who hears wants to add, you can put it on the comment or send me some messages so that we can build our learning together. So thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye bye.